Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Kitty goes meow Grossi. And today we're going to be previewing the Week 5 matchup between the Green Bay Packers and the Cincinnati Bengals. A little bit of a surprise this season, as both teams having the same record heading into Week 5. Only one can leave. But joining me today is a man who is doing lots of things with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's from New Stripe City, Mr. Ace Boogie himself. Ace, thanks for coming on, bud.
No, Tom, I appreciate you for having me on. I'm extremely excited to be able to talk some Bengals Packers for sure.
Let's get it. We got the merch. We're decked out right now. We're repping right now. Hell yeah. We're looking good. Now, here's the thing. I want to get right into it because I feel like for the first time for a while, like the media is finally talking about the Bengals in a positive light. Like it started with the drafting of Joe Burrow, but now that the Bengals have found some early season success, they're now actually starting to hype up the Bengals a little bit. Can you tell me is that a weird thing? Are you still consuming traditional media in that you're just hey, we're on SportsCenter now?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've consumed traditional media, to be honest with you, but it definitely has been the Joe Burrow effect, I think, on the national media. But there are still a lot of doubters. Now the narrative is kind of shifting to, are they really this good? But I think that it begins and starts with Joe Burrow. I mean, as soon as the Bengals drafted him, just even locally in the city of Cincinnati, it was just a totally different feeling. And there was just a feeling of regeneration injected back into this fan base just because we were so tired of Andy Dalton. And so Joe Burrow coming in here, also Marvin Lewis leaving, it just reignited this fan base and just really gave us hope and something to look forward to. So I have noticed, though, that a lot of Bengals fans have told me they're actually finally talking about us again. So it definitely has been a while for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you draft Joe Burrow, and I think it was a Thursday night game against the Browns last season. That was the first full game that I watched him in the NFL, and I was like, oh damn, he's good. The poise he had in the pocket and the accuracy, I was like, okay, they got something here. Kind of looking back at that first season, obviously before the injury, kind of did you see? Oh yeah, that's our franchise guy. Because of course, teams go out and they pick QBs one and they don't always pan out. But looking at Joe Burrow and watching him play those select few games, what were your thoughts on watching him play?
Oh man, it was amazing because the one thing that most people forget about it is he had no preseason. He didn't even play in the preseason game. So from his first game, I felt like this guy was different, right? Yeah. He came out, he handled business. Unfortunately for a call that was reversed at the end, it was something about AJ Green with offensive pass interference. They really ruined a storybook beginning to Joe Burrow's career, where he comes down against the Chargers and gets that last minute touchdown. And it was just the entire time that I was watching this guy, his first season, it was this guy isn't a rookie. And a lot of people talk about, he only won 2 games, but the fact that we were in those games any way possible was only because of Joe Burrow. And so we all knew that if we put the right pieces around this guy, that the sky was the limit, because the things that he was able to do last year were just super impressive. And I think once he went down, a lot of people kind of forgot about how good of a start he really had. He probably, honestly, only really looked like a rookie quarterback in 2 games. I think the Steelers game and the Ravens game.
Sure.
And so for me, it was just wow, we were excited and ready for him to get back rocking.
Yeah, I mean, so you're coming into this season and talking to Bengals fans, there was kind of a divide before the draft, right? It was the Jamar Chase conversation, or it was going after a guy like Sewell, right? It was there's 2 different camps. And the one you go, okay, offensive line is kind of important, hence look back at last year. But then you have Jamar Chase and that rare kind of connection that they could have. You already had T. Higgins, who had himself a really nice year last year. What camp did you find yourself in? And when they actually went with Jamar Chase, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I was kind of the captain, and I have another podcast I do, is the New Black, with my man Zim Hude. I was probably the captain of Team Sewell, which was Panay Sewell. He was definitely the captain of Team Chase. But the one thing that I will say is a lot of that stemmed from obviously Burrow getting hurt and the Bengals not fixing this offensive line for not only just the past year, for about 4 or 5 seasons. And so I was on Team Sewell, but I always kept in mind that I felt like there was a strong possibility that Jamar Chase could come to this team. And I thought that it actually made sense. Like the way that things actually went in the offseason with them getting Riley Reef, with them having Jonah coming back, which was a guy that they invested in early on and really believed in him as the left tackle. It kind of did make sense in order for them to go out and get Jamar Chase. With Panay, I think that they would have probably had played him at guard. If I were to draft Panay, I probably would have played him at left tackle. But reading in between the lines and seeing everything, and this unique opportunity where Jamar Chase is available, like that never really happens. No. Where you have the opportunity to take the number 1 pick and his number 1 receiver. Like that's just nuts. And the fact that we also had some of the LSU offense already set up within our offense, it just made it a no-brainer. And obviously, if it's left up to Joe Burrow, he's going to pick his guy, Jamar Chase. So when that happened, I wasn't really upset with it. It was just like, okay, I'm pretty sure that we're going to take Chase, and I'm positive that it's going to work because even though he had a year off, they've already played together. This isn't a guy that took a year off and he never played with his quarterback before. So I totally understood that, and I was on board immediately. And then the second day we picked Jackson Carman, I spoke with Willie Anderson, the Bengals great, about that decision, and I was completely comfortable with it. So for me, I went from being the captain of Team Sewell to now trying to defend the Jamar Chase pick and point out all of the issues that have happened with the teams like Detroit, which is funny because he went to a team that didn't have wide receivers, right? And you're seeing what that impact is. The Lions haven't won a game yet. So I was completely on board as soon as I became Team Chase, I guess, after they drafted him.
As soon as it goes in, you're like, I get it, right? Like, I can understand the logic. Because I feel like you could have justified either pick, right? It's like either just building up the trenches or it's going and get that kind of like, once in a lifetime, at least connection opportunity that you don't, like you said, that doesn't really come around very often. Right. So at that point, you're like, all right, let's go Jamar Chase. And I have to imagine during the preseason, because we had some preseason this year, during the preseason, the story started shifting to Jamar Chase and not being able to catch footballs. And everybody jumped on that. And they're like, well, you should have drafted Sewell, and just going after him. I want to be very clear. I drafted Jamar Chase in almost all of my fantasy leagues. So nice. I believed. Just want to put that out there. But kind of like you watch that preseason, and are you putting any stock into it? Or are you like, is there like a tinge of buyer's remorse? Or you're like, let's just wait till there's actual real games?
No, I mean, the first game that I actually went to was the first preseason game against Tampa Bay, right? And so I was at that game, and Jamar Chase caught a screen pass, and they took him out of the game. And so when the second game happened, I was watching, and I did see him, drop the first one. And one of them, it really wasn't fair because he kind of made a business decision against Landon Collins and just really didn't want to take that big hit in preseason. And I didn't blame him for that because, why would you get hurt in a meaningless preseason game? But I think after that second one and the third one, when he dropped it, it was just in his head. And I think that it was a mental thing, but I always gave him the benefit of the doubt because, he hadn't played since 2019. He was trying to get adjusted to the NFL, learning the speeds, learning the routes, learning this offense. So for me, like whenever I look at a receiver, the number one thing that I always remember at the end of the season is they always talk about, how fast the NFL is, how they had to adjust to that. There's always a learning curve. And so I felt like that would always be the case with Jamar Chase, but I definitely think it was blown out of proportion because there was the one time where somebody actually asked him about the differences between college football and NFL football, and they turned it into him saying that he was dropping balls because of that, and that was not the case.
They were like whatsoever. The white stripes on it or something. Like they spun his answer around, and he's like, "I didn't say that."
That was not. They literally asked him the difference, and it was really annoying, honestly. Like even as a fan, because our own media was just asking him every single time about the drops, and I think that it had some PTSD to do with John Ross because John Ross had a habit of dropping balls and stuff like that. Oh,
John Ross.
So I think that kind of spilled over, but I couldn't wait until the regular season happened so that it could just all go away.
Yeah. And it went away very quickly, like very, very. They like it got real quiet all of a sudden. It's just like he got used to the football. Oh wait, that wasn't a problem. Um, heading into this season, like before you even play week 1, you're in a very interesting division, right?
Definitely.
You had the Steelers who won 11 straight games and then got their ass kicked by the Browns. I know you're very upset about that, right? So you have that. You have the Browns who are looking like they're contenders. You have the Ravens who are always going to be in contention. And then, of course, you have the Bengals. So before you even play week 1, going into this season, kind of what were your expectations for it? Like, were you looking at it as like, listen, I just want to see progress. I want to see Joe Burrow, like, advance, come back from injury, look good, and just like build those building blocks? Or did you kind of have like in the back of your head, like maybe, we could be like pretty darn competitive this year?
So I have another channel that I do that's called AFC North Talk. So it's me and a Browns YouTuber, Ravens, and Steelers YouTuber. So last year was actually the first season where I had to watch literally every single game from every single team in the division, and it taught me a lot. And it showed me our areas where we were deficient. It also let me know about the other teams. And so I actually came into this season on that show with a lot of confidence. And like a lot of the Browns and other divisional fans were just like, this guy's delusional. He's just being a homer. And, for me, I was confident because I knew what we had in Joe Burrow, right?
Yeah.
I knew what we had in Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins. I knew about the weaknesses around the division. Like I was literally one of the first people that said before the season started, Ben is done. Like it's going to be over, especially with that offensive line, them not doing anything there. The team that scares me the most, I wouldn't say the Browns, and that's not because I don't respect the Browns. It's just that we were competitive with them. You talked about that Thursday night football game with Baker and Burrow. I think the Battle of Ohio is going to be a super competitive one, and it's finally going to be fun after 2 decades. So I think that they are definitely a good team, but I'm looking at Burrow versus Baker. Now, the team that always scares me the most in this division that we have not been able to beat is Baltimore. They've completely dominated us since Lamar Jackson has come in. But with them having all of those injuries, it just really opened up the North for this team. So I actually went into this pretty confident because I felt like this first stretch of games, the first 3, I believe, or the first 4, I felt were winnable games for the Bengals. This is the one where I was like, all right, now this is going to be a hard, tough matchup for us. But I kind of saw it going this way with the Steelers at least being the worst team in the division. I felt like the Browns were going to be good. I knew that they would get tested early, and I knew that the Ravens would be the Ravens. But I will say that I am shocked that with all of the injuries, they're still up there as well. But the AFC North is just competitive, man. I remember saying last year that before that season, I felt like the AFC North was going to send 3 teams to the playoffs, and they did. And so this season, I think that is still a possibility. Obviously, I think the Steelers are kind of struggling. Maybe they get a win this weekend, but it's going to be a competitive division, and it's going to be tough. You got 3 guys that won the Heisman in this division. And, Ben is the old man going out. Maybe the Steelers, I don't know. They're talking about that Rodgers thing. I don't know. We could talk about that, but
we're not going to talk about that.
But I think the AFC North is a tough division, and you got to take every game as it comes and try to get out on top.
And you mentioned kind of like the lack of success against Baltimore and being competitive against the Browns. And you look at last season when you had Joe Burrow, right, and being competitive in those games. Obviously, Joe Burrow gets injured, so the rest of the season, we're not evaluating that, as it is. But the defense was something that I was also looking at. Like the defense last year was struggling, right? They were in the bottom for a lot of stats that not looking so great. Can you kind of like point to, what is different between last season and this season in terms of the defensive play, in terms of the offense? Obviously, you have Joe Burrow back. Like what has changed that has allowed this team to get off to this hot start, to kind of start the season?
Yeah, I think if we're starting with the defense, the first thing was being healthy. I mean, the Bengals, the last couple of seasons, they have been so injury riddled. It's been ridiculous. Like as soon as they drafted or as soon as they signed DJ Reader, our best nose tackle, he goes down. They just had so many injuries at the defensive tackle position last year. Geno Atkins was out there playing with like one arm. Mike Daniels. They just didn't have anybody out there.
And Mike Daniels.
Yeah, they were also decimated in the secondary, the corner position. Yeah. So they just weren't really healthy. And then it was also a mix of there were a lot of Marvin Lewis guys that came from our old 4-3 scheme and weren't really a fit for the new scheme. So you talk about some of those good players like Carlos Dunlap, Geno Atkins. They're kind of playing out of position, and they just didn't really fit the scheme. So one of the things I think was a huge difference between the defense from last year and this year is that they kind of moved on from those guys that were the Marvin Lewis guys that didn't fit the scheme. They found more guys that fit the scheme, hit on more of those draft picks. And now the defense is playing way better than they were last year. And I think that that's just because now Zach Taylor and his coaching staff and Lou Anarumo, the defense coordinator, they finally have their guys that fit the system. And it was tough because you had to move on from guys that a lot of fans were familiar with. You talk about Dunlap, you talk about Geno, you talk about William Jackson III. But the guys that they brought in were guys that were more confident in the scheme. They fit it more. They weren't really worried. There were no nonsense guys they bought in. And I think that's a big factor. Flipping to the offensive line, that was a huge factor as well, because everyone talked about the offensive line, but the biggest detriment to it, I believe, other than some of the personnel, we can get into that, but I think it was the actual offensive line coach, Jim Turner. There was no way that the Bengals should have had him as the offensive line coach. I think Zach Taylor had a personal relationship with him. That's why he lasted longer. But as soon as they got rid of him and brought back Frank Pollock, a lot of Bengals fans already knew who Frank Pollock was. A lot of Bengals fans were surprised that they let Frank Pollock go Zach Taylor's first year, because he is an amazing line coach. He can get, the best play out of some average players. And so I think it really started when they hired Frank Pollock back, and then they went out and they got Riley Reif. I mean, getting rid of Bobby Hart was a huge upgrade. This is a guy that gave up 10 sacks in one season. So they did that. They also got stable over there. They signed Quentin Spain during the season last year. We all knew that he was solid. They moved on from Michael Jordan, which, that was the guy responsible for getting Joe Burrow hit. And the only reason he was in the game was because of Jim Turner. And Jim Turner just wasn't a good, he just rubbed a lot of players the wrong way and didn't really know what he was doing, to be honest. And so him being removed from that situation, you actually get a coach that can actually coach these guys up. And so I think that was a big factor. And then they brought in some draft picks here and there. And then we just knew that we were going to need 3 different receivers to get targets. Like, it didn't work with AJ Green last year. And I think that was partly because of the chemistry with him and Joe Burrow. They never really got to establish that. You talk about no preseason. AJ goes down in training camp. They literally never really played with each other until week 1. And you could kind of see it. And so them bringing in Jamar Chase, that just pretty much fixed that issue that they had there. Mixon is back healthy. A lot of it, to be honest with you, is just being healthy. It's health. Being healthy, improving those coaching positions. They also brought in a D-line coach and Marlon Hobby, who's done a spectacular job. And they've just completely turned this team around.
Well, I mean, it looks like obviously it's the beginning of the season, but it looks like, the Bengals are definitely on a different trajectory, right? Like they're on the upswing there. And with each passing season, you're just going to be able to go through the draft and, kind of just build on that foundation that you already have. I mean, how many teams need a franchise QB? And you have one, right? And you have, 3 receivers who can play ball. You're building up that offensive line. Defense gets better. And then all of a sudden, you get a balanced football team. So, kind of as this season progresses and kind of taking a look forward, the last time the Bengals won a playoff game, 91, if I'm not mistaken, it's 91. So 30 years ago. So this year, looking in 2021, 2022 season, do you think the Bengals have an opportunity to get that 7 seed, potentially even higher? Is this team a contender right now? I know it's only week 5. Right. Do you think that they're contenders right now?
I think they are. And I honestly was kind of shocked with that. I knew that we would win way more games than the national media expected us to.
Sure.
Just because they had so many last year where they were, losing by 3 or 5 points. Yeah. And with all of the changes, with everyone healthy and their improvements, I felt like 2022 would be that year. But it could be this year. I mean, honestly, this game this weekend is going to tell us a lot, because they still have some cupcake games against the Lions. And I'm not just going to say that it's just an automatic W, but those are games if we were to win this game, I wasn't expecting that. So if they do that, this could be a team that could potentially push for the wild card. I definitely think that it's possible. And I think that the way that Joe Burrow has responded, I tried to give us some leeway to give him some time to get comfortable. And it seems like he's comfortable now. So honestly, I think that this team does have a realistic shot to potentially get into that wild card and sneak into it.
And you mentioned this week, and I feel like there's also a split. Like there's some Packers fans that are just like, oh, it's the Bengals. Like we got this. But no, like, because I've seen the Bengals play now a couple of times. I'm like, it's not like same old Bengals kind of thing. And on top of that, the Packers are banged up. Josh Myers, our rookie center, he was announced today that he's going to be out, so he's not going to be playing. Jair Alexander, not going to be playing, our number one corner. We don't have Zadarius Smith, our number one pass rusher. Elton Jenkins is back in practice, but he might wind up playing center. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And if you're looking at this game, and you have the Packers offense who's playing pretty darn good football. What are you looking at in terms of how this game is going to go? Like, what are you concerned about? Where do you think the Bengals are going to be able to take advantage of, et cetera?
I mean, for me, I think the biggest concern is always going to be that Packers offense. I mean, you're talking about Devontae Adams, best receiver in football, and Aaron Rodgers, right? It starts with those guys. Another guy that I'm super concerned about is Aaron Jones. I mean, the way that he's used in the passing game and the way that he's a dual threat on the ground as well. I mean, that guy is someone that you're going to have to keep an eye on. You talk about Randall Cobb. We saw last week, Randall Cobb in the slot still has that connection. So I think the biggest concern is the Packers offense, and can the Bengals offense score consistently? We've had games where we've gotten off to slow starts. You talk about the Jacksonville game, the Bears game. They cannot do that against Aaron Rodgers at all. And so Devontae Adams obviously scares me. Aaron Rodgers, I would say all of your weapons on offense scare me. And then defensively, I think that we're going to have to step it up, especially if there are injuries on that offensive line. We got to get some pressure on the quarterback. The Bengals did a great job within their first 3 games of doing it, but in the 4th game, they didn't really get to Trevor Lawrence as well as they had done before. So that's definitely going to be a key. And I think, just making sure that you keep up with this team and having that confidence and not playing scared, I think is the biggest thing. And doing what you can to win. Like, even if it's ugly, whatever you got to do to get out of there with the win is what you have to do. And the one thing that I will say that does give me some confidence is, like you said, Jair Alexander is out. So whenever, you play the Bengals, I feel like you have to look at all 3 of the receivers that we have, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. If you don't have someone to be able to guard them, that's going to cause some kind of trouble. But we also have to keep Joe Burrow clean. So as you mentioned, Zadarius Smith isn't there, but I do know about Gary that you guys have over there. You guys still have some formidable linemen over there as well. And then the safeties I know are pretty good. But I do think that we will be able to take advantage of the wide receivers. But I think that this is potentially trending towards a shootout because if Devontae Adams is on Eli Apple, that is not going to be a good thing for us. And so I think that the points will come in bunches, but they've got to play smart football. And then the other thing is, can Zach match LaFleur? I mean, I think Matt is a great coach. Zach has had, his ups and downs with this team, with the fan base. And this is going to be a game where he can't make any of those mistakes either with his game plan. So, I think that this is a game that could go either way, honestly. It's really going to come down to Burrow versus Rodgers, and I'm super excited to watch this game. I'm going to hope that the Bengals win. Wouldn't shock me if they lost. But even if we do lose, I just want us to be competitive in a game with a team as qualified as the Packers. Yeah.
No, I think I agree with your analysis that it might wind up being a very high scoring game, especially, Eric Stokes, our rookie CB, on Jamar Chase. They are very familiar with one another, but I think that's going to be a matchup to look for. I think Kevin King should be playing, but like you said, it's T. Higgins, who I think is playing, right? It looks like he's trending to play. That's 3 receivers you got to worry about. So I think it's going to be a battle, but honestly, it should be a really, really fun game. And I think the whole Burrow versus Rodgers thing is definitely gonna be something to watch. But Ace, I appreciate you coming on, bud. Can you tell the people where they can find you and all the things that you do?
Sure, definitely. You can find me on YouTube at New Stripe City. We do all kind of stuff over there. I do the Orange is the New Black podcast as well with my partner Zim. And then you can also find me on Twitter at New Stripe City. And I also have a secondary YouTube channel if you want to know about what's going on in the AFC North. I know a lot of us play you guys. You guys just beat the Packers. So thank you just beat the Steelers. So thank you for that.
So welcome.
But you can find me over there at AFC North Talk as well.
There we go. I love it. Listen, there's a lot of the fan base here with the Grossi posse that have a soft spot for the Cincinnati Bengals. We got the whole kitty goes meow thing, so we're rocking with it. So we wish you the best of luck with the season, just not on Sunday, but the rest of the season. And we appreciate you for beating the Minnesota Vikings, because that was just beautiful and a great way to start this season.
Yes, sir. Definitely. Same to you, bro. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. But folks, thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.